Welcome to the Wolf Power Club, the weekly podcast where we discuss energy, industry and politics. I'm your host Alex. I've sold and bought a few companies and also I've sold billions of litres. Join me on this journey to net zero. Download on Apple Podcasts. Season 1 brought to you by AIM Recruit, the leading recruiters in logistics, transport and energy at www.aimrecruit.com. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wolf Power Club podcast. In a year of 2024, when it's been maybe the hangover of the economy recovering from things like the COVID years, the Ukraine years, we're now going to review this year with one of the leading journalists in the fuel sector, editor of Fuel Oil News, Margaret Major. Welcome to the podcast, Margaret.
Thank you, Alex. It's really good to be here. Thanks for having us on.
Margaret, obviously we're filming at the end of the year. Very appropriately, it's snowing across Britain, so I'm sure many of your readers will be both working hard delivering fuel, but also it's a time like this that's very important for the industry's finances. But it's been an unbelievably wet and mild year. Has that been feedback from some of your customers and people appearing in the magazine this year?
Yeah, I think you're right. It has been a strange year weather-wise, and not the first. I think the last probably 3 winters have been wet, mild winters, and the much longed-for cold, crispy, snowy Christmas day has not quite come. So maybe this year can buck the trend.
Yeah, certainly we're dreaming of a white Christmas has always been a favourite of the fuel distribution industry, although they probably modify it to extremely cold but not enough snow on the ground to stop a truck getting off a driveway. But I just wanted to, if you could tell our listeners, because we have listeners now in 15 countries, so thank you to everyone for helping to fuel your knowledge by listening to the podcast. Could you tell our listeners that aren't Fuel Oil News subscribers, and please do all subscribe to it, it's a great magazine and great website. Can you tell us a little bit about your big career moments and what does editor of Fuel Oil News mean?
Yeah, definitely, Alex. A little bit of context on the publication itself. It's an interesting one in that it's actually a publication that came out of the community that it serves. So the original launch of Fuel Oil News back in 1977 was by a chap involved in fuel distribution in Knutsford. And the really great thing about the publication is it was originally a newsletter between distributors. So they shared notes, met in a pub, I think talked about things like bad credit risks and customers that maybe needed to be known about between the group. Yeah, so the magazine itself, as I say, came out of a newsletter between distributors. So that's its position in the sector, and it's grown and evolved, but it always retains that sense of being the place where the community meets. The same with the website, the newsletter. So we exist not necessarily to kind of blow the big scoops of the energy sector or the fuel distribution sector. We exist to enable the community to discuss, share knowledge, highlight common issues, and raise their voices, if you like, to be heard.
Fuel your weekly knowledge with the Wolf Power Club podcast. Subscribe now. I think it's certainly for those when they engage in the website and the newspaper, it's always much talked about. It's got the big issues, and that's why today we really want to review 2024. We're at the end of the year. It's been one of the most challenging years in many ways, and I was just thinking, can you just talk about the first quarter? I know in January each year you quite often have what's happened with the fuel pricing in terms of the UK downstream. And I think the reality was that 2024 started, or the first quarter, in a period where kind of the price kept on falling. So you had that mega high in 2022 when the invasion of Ukraine happened and that there was troubles of supply. But by the end of 23 and the start of 2024, It seemed that the price had fallen, the barrel price had nearly halved from 131 to 70, and then suddenly it was a real tough time for the distributors. Did some of the distributors show you the causes of those sort of kind of very challenging times in the first quarter of 2024 between January and March?
Yeah, there's always, I mean, in this industry, it's price is hugely volatile, more so than probably in any other energy sector. And driven by so many different factors. And obviously you have things like the geopolitical tensions going on at the time. Obviously the Russia-Ukraine war was still continuing. Then the Red Sea crisis came to bear. And obviously the Hamas-Israeli conflict as well. So we started the year with huge geopolitical tensions going on that were affecting the sector and driving energy price volatility. So we came into the year with very high prices, and then, as you say, the prices dropped very rapidly. Coupled with in the UK itself, the potential for political change, which everybody knew was almost certainly a certainty at that point, albeit we didn't know when. And it was started the year knowing that it was going to be a year of huge uncertainty and change.
And I think also, like when for those our listeners might not know, for a distributor, falling prices are challenging. I know everyone says you can hedge that, you can hedge this, but the reality of the distribution model is that either for a lagged price or for a daily price, you are buying the product and then 3 or 4 days later you're selling it to the customer, and a lot of it is spot. So falling prices, what it does do, although it's still a sustainable industry, it really takes out the sort of margin that's in the market to keep the industry going as an industry with high cost base, because you're constantly repairing equipment, renewing facilities. And I think as a result we saw a lot of changes of directors in 2024 outside of yours truly. There's been many of the companies have sort of refreshed their leadership teams, but you guys very kindly at Fuel Oil News always interview the new directors, and you have a focus on some of the leaders in the industry. What have been some of your favourites from 2024 that have come to the publication?
We love interviewing people. I mean, as I said to you, the community is what Fuel Oil News is all about. You know, we exist to serve the community, and we're part of the community, and we love hearing from the voices in the community, and they're really varied. And it's not necessarily always the big voices, if you like, that are the ones that we love interviewing, although that's a huge part of it. We also really value those interviews where, I mean, for example, this year I think we had we had some anniversaries, 70 years of Gleaner Fuels. We spoke to David Todd, and there's lots of companies like that in the sector that have been around a very, very long time. And I think that's why they are well versed to withstand some of these highs and lows and challenges. They're kind of not new to the sector. But you're right, I mean, margins became a huge issue this year, and did see some changes in senior teams, etc., across the business. One highlight for me was definitely speaking with George Eustace, because obviously he was such a huge part of the achievements of the sector last year in getting the change in legislation in the energy bill to include the creation of the renewable liquid heating fuel obligation, which I think Ken Cronin spoke about at some length in a previous podcast of yours.
And what were some of the other really engaged stories with in 2024? I certainly enjoyed the edition where you did a special on SAF and aviation fuel. Can you just enlighten people a bit more what seems to be the stories in addition to HVO that really hit home in 2024?
There's been a wide range, actually. I mean, another conversation that was very enjoyable was talking to Trier Energy, Pat Manane and his team in Ireland, as they pivot to a slightly new approach in fuel distribution or energy distribution, where they're looking at working with companies to assist them in transitioning to future fuels, and actually all the necessary kind of paperwork and accreditation around that. So that was nice to talk to a company that's looking at, a different way of addressing some of the challenges. We have had a fascinating, my colleague Claudia, one of our content creators, Claudia Weeks, worked on a piece of veterans in fuel distribution, and that was a really popular read this year. We've worked with the charity Veterans into Logistics for quite a long time, helping them to raise the profile of the work they do to find new careers for veterans in HGV driving. and obviously there's an opportunity for that within the fuel distribution sector. And Claudia spoke to quite a few of the veterans that are within the fuel industry and about their journey into the industry, and that was a really good read. We've talked about integration during acquisition, and a really nice piece on that was when we got to hear both sides of the story. So we talked to NWF about their acquisition of Jeff Borman Fuels, and again spoke to the depot manager, Paul Taylor from Jeff Borman, and about his experience of that acquisition and the transition from being, a small family-owned distributor business to being part of a bigger business. And that's obviously something that's quite a frequent experience in the sector.
One of the issues I really enjoyed in the last 12 months was you did a focus on talent, job pipeline, because I think it's fair to say that, fuel distribution, unlike sort of the world of sort of media or AI, which I now also work in, which almost has an open gate for young people coming into because it's like the buzz industry to be in. Fuel distribution probably doesn't have that luxury. I was just wondering, when you guys looked at the pipeline and the talent coming into the industry, what that article found, because I think one of the things that I like at UKIFTA is Apprentice of the Year, because it's so important for us to get young talent into the fuel distribution industry. But I was just wondering, what did the publication discover about pipeline with some of the challenges for fuel distribution?
Absolutely. It is a really interesting subject, and one we've worked really hard to kind of broaden our remit to ensure we are talking to everybody in the industry, whether that's the big companies, the family-run distribution companies, the people that have been in it for decades and those coming into it. And in fact, our December issue, which will be out in a couple of weeks, does contain another feature looking at the next generation and what that means to distributors, and what the journey's been like for the next generation in family businesses in looking at coming into their family business and whether they stay involved or look at an alternative career. So, it was really interesting to hear the voices of those younger people in the sector. And there's some very good apprenticeship schemes run by some of the companies in the sector that we do like to cover and to talk to those that are involved as to what's attracted them in. And I think a massive part of the message is that they want to be part of a solution, that they can see the need for the industry, they can see the need for the energy distribution that's carried out by the members of the industry, and it's essential to everyday life, and it's really important that that's maintained, and constantly overcoming the challenges that faces the sector, whether that's supply issues or whether it is the challenges of the transition, staffing, skills shortages, whatever that may be. So it's vital that we do continue to attract young people into the sector, with a fresh look as well at how we develop and improve the sector.
And I would also say, that the sector's hugely focused on sustainability, as we touched on both HVO and SAF, the Virgin flight this year, the villages in Cornwall solely run on HVO, and it's been rolled out across the country. I would also ask any leadership people in the energy industry listening to this that if you have got young talent, let Margaret know about it, because we want people to be that classic, if you see it, you believe it. So the more great ambassadors in that sort of 25 and under category that people can learn about, that's the type of thing that will help us have a continuous chain of people coming in. So please do send them into Fuel Oil News, and also at UKIFTA they have an apprenticeship of the year. So it'd be fantastic if people can do that. And I was just also wondering, in terms of sustainability, where do you think the industry's going in 2025? Because we have had those HVO and SAF breakthroughs in the last year. Where do you think it's going in terms of liquid fuels? Because there's still north of 1 million homes. Most industries that need a liquid fuel are supplied by all of your community. So where do you think it's going in 2025?
I think this is where it's vital that the government does deliver on its obligation to look at that consultation and get that legislation over the line, because there's a massive impact that can be had immediately in delivering an HVO kerosene blend to those 1.7 million customers, and immediately delivering a carbon reduction, which will be a huge success story for 2025, which we'd love to be reporting on. So in the meantime, though members of the community are transitioning their fleets to sustainable liquid fuels, producers are continually looking at feedstocks and solving the kind of feedstock availability. And we love reporting on those companies that are looking at quirky ways of, sort of solid waste into sustainable fuels. Firefly Fuels was another big interview we did in 2024, James Highgate, and some of the work that's going on there to delivering global feedstocks that could solve that solution in terms of the volumes needed if we do continue to roll out increased uptake of sustainable fuels. So telemetry solutions has been another big advance we've seen in the last couple of years, which I think will only continue. So looking at greater efficiencies, reducing consumption. So that's been quite an interesting one as well.
Yeah, I think it's a huge point you raised, Margaret, is that look, with data, you can really drive solutions on reductions of carbon. You can just drive massive opportunity. I think the other thing is that you can optimize fleet, you can reduce trips, and that being on top of your data is certainly why I've passionately switched to the data side of the energy industry, because I do see it's such a win of what you've already got. What one piece of advice, in addition to obviously reading Fuel Oil News' website and publication, would you give your younger self to get into the energy industry right now?
That's a good question in itself. Getting into any industry, it's a case of considering what skills you have or what you could bring to a sector, and then finding a role in the industry that could use those skills. To me, it's I'm absolutely enjoying my time in the energy sector. As a publishing company, we work across several energy titles, and it's one of the most challenging aspects of our time to solve the issues around the energy transition and what that means for people's jobs, what that means for the end users, and to deliver a just transition. So, looking back now, I almost wish I'd got into it sooner. And I think start anywhere. Just start, whatever your role is, whether it's a driver, whether it's in the back office staff, whether it's, whatever in the accounts team, wherever you start, just bring your skills to the sector and see how you fit, because I think you'll get very quickly wrapped up in a community that are all about the people, they're all about their customers, about doing a good job, and about improving the energy sector and the part they play in that. So from my point of view, it would be to keep customers at the heart of everything you do. It's what we try to do at Fuel Oil News. We consider who our community is and what they need and want to read about, and what we can bring through the magazine or the website that will be of value to them. And we, as you said, get in touch with us. We want to hear what people want to read about, and the things that we can help cover. So keep customers at the heart of everything you do. And something my mum taught me many years ago is the kind of principle of stewardship. And it's that sense of taking whatever you get involved with and make it better than it was before you got involved. So I think with that head, you can make a difference in any sector. So be determined to make a difference, and a positive one. Whether
it's time or money, where would you be investing in the energy industry right now?
Oh, that's a good question. In some ways, we are, as a company, already investing in the energy industry with the titles that we produce. And as I say, that's across an array of energy titles. And we invest our time. I've got a brilliant team, across the titles. The Fuel Oil News team is wonderful, established people that really care about, everything they do, deliver right, whatever role they have within the team. So there's a huge investment of emotion, energy, headspace, time in delivering content that we feel will help progress those conversations in the sector and help deliver solutions, which is what we consider our role to be, to advocate for finding those solutions and enabling people to have the discussions that deliver the solutions. From a personal point of view, if I was investing, I think I'd be investing in probably energy storage, because I think with all that we're going to be demanding of the grid as we increase electrification, I think storage is going to be key to reducing the challenge on a creaking grid and enabling us to deliver more electrification where appropriate, but without seeing the grid crumble around us. So probably an energy storage company would be where my money would go. But
What do you want from the government on energy policy in 2025?
the first call would obviously be to deliver on the consultation that was promised and to get that legislation over the line. The crazy thing is it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the government, it's a win for the transition, it's a win for the consumer, win for the industry as well. So there you are, it's a win-win-win-win-win. So I think that one needs to be actioned as soon as possible. I can't see any negatives in delivering that legislation and getting an HVO blend into domestic heating, an instant hit on decarbonisation. Somebody, a very long time ago, one of my interviews, somebody said that we're always in danger of not delivering the imperfect now for the perfect future. And I think that's a huge problem in the energy sector, where the arguments roll around what the perfect future scenario could look like, and seeing anything that's delivered now as being a pale imitation of that. But actually, if it's part of decarbonising now and getting us on that journey, then it's a step towards where we need to be, and it should be taken. So I would absolutely exhort for that consultation to be delivered and the legislation to be implemented. And then the only other thing is consistency, that whatever they say they will do and whatever legislation is put in place, that it's then maintained so that people can invest and have that certainty over the direction they take.
And the final quick fire question before you can...
Say, can I chop one more thing in there, Alex? There is one 100%. Other thing that I've mentioned it earlier, but the need to consider the end user, the people, in whatever decisions they take. I think particularly with reference to the energy transition, obviously with my energy head on, but whatever decisions are taken, people are always affected. So I think it's considering the impact and the unintended impacts of any decision that's taken.
I think that leads nicely to our final quickfire question. Just before you can tell, after the quickfire, we'll tell listeners the best way to stay in touch with Fuel Oil News. But essentially, our final quickfire question: what do you want the customer to do? Because there's always emphasis on government, always emphasis on business, but actually, what do you want the customer to do? Because I find actually a lot of people don't realise, but people vote with their feet or their wallet, so to speak. And essentially, what would you like the customer to do that therefore helps the industry?
Be more vocal would be good. I think customers need to get involved, because decisions that are taken in energy will always affect them. Everybody uses energy in their domestic setting or in their agricultural setting or their commercial setting. So having a voice on how that rolls out is really important, and finding ways to get involved.
Obviously, we've talked a lot about Fuel Oil News today, but I was just wondering, how do people stay in touch? And I know also you guys have a much broader width, because, when we had our big launch at Solar and Storage, I met Claudia and your team there. So can you also tell some of the other publications? And for all listeners today, we'll put links in the show notes so you can contact the editorial team. And I was just wondering, the best way to stay in touch, and maybe some of the other publications that you also do within the sector.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we do love people getting in touch with us. I say we love to hear the challenges that they're experiencing, the success stories. So do get in touch with us. So I can be reached at Margaret at andpublishing.co.uk. AND Publishing, so Ashley and Dunville is the name of the publishing company, but it's andpublishing.co.uk. And the publishing company, we have three titles. So Fuel Oil News was the flagship title, launched in 1977, and then in 2007 we launched a title called Oil Installer, and we work very closely with Offtech, the trade association, to put out a quarterly publication and a website that serves their members of those technicians involved in installing and servicing oil-fired central heating, so oil-fired heating. And that, again, we are looking at some of the challenges around the transition and how that affects that workforce, and those that are considering upskilling and taking on additional skills to deliver some of the renewable technology solutions. So again, interesting conversations going on in Oil Installer. And the third title that we have was launched in 2008 and is Renewable Energy Installer. So that looks at the flip side and looks at those involved in delivering renewable technology solutions to domestic and commercial heating and energy. So the interesting thing is having those titles in a portfolio gives us a really interesting and I think balanced view across the challenges from all sides. And one thing we're really keen to do is to encourage that open-mindedness and the desire to deliver the right solution to the right setting, rather than to be too single-mindedly promoting one solution over another. I think at the moment there is no single solution that will solve all the problems. I think we need to look at an array of solutions, and we enjoy across our portfolio considering all those various solutions and where they might fit into the final delivery.
Fantastic. I'd really like to thank you for your time today, Margaret. I think that summing up what we've just covered over the podcast today is that in the review of 2024, it was a challenging start to the year with falling fuel prices. Then you have the huge highlights of the year where SAF and HVO was being rolled out by the sector, and directors coming. I think you talked about the wonderful young people that are entering the industry, and I love that phrase of being a custodian, leaving it in a place that's better. I'd like to say that it's been great to cover so many issues today. I'm sure you are searching hard for the after party venue in Leeds, so any good bars or nightclubs, please contact for your little news for UKIPTA. I'd just like to thank Margaret for her time today.
No, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks.